August 1943 occupied France. On a remote Luftwaffe airfield just after 400 hours, Oberleutnant Vera Schulz, Chief Technical Officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, received what should have been thrilling news. An American P-47 Thunderbolt had been forced down, its pilot captured and the aircraft largely intact. For months, German pilots had reported encounters with this massive American fighter, claiming it had almost impossible capabilities. Now, German engineers finally had the opportunity to study one up close. When Schulz first saw the P-47 on the tarmac, his reaction mirrored that of every pilot who had faced it. The aircraft looked absurd, an ungainly, overweight flying milk bottle. Yet, as the methodical engineer began his inspection, he would soon uncover a sobering truth. The P-47 was not grotesque. It was prophetic. Its very components were proof that Germany had already lost a war its leaders did not realize they were fighting. Schulz was no combat pilot, he was an aeronautical engineer who had previously worked for Messerschmitt. His role was to analyze enemy aircraft, find weaknesses, and recommend tactical countermeasures. Upon seeing the Thunderbolt for the first time, his first impression was disbelief. This machine was massive, almost comically so. Its fuselage was built around a colossal radial engine, giving it a fully loaded weight of nearly 8 tons. For comparison, the Focke-Wulf FW-190, Germany's frontline fighter, weighed just 4 tons. Pilots called the American plane the flying milk bottle, and as Schulz examined it, he understood why it appeared far too heavy to fly. But Schulz cared little for appearances. He cared about function, and what he discovered would leave him deeply unsettled. He began with the heart of the machine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine. When his team removed the cowling, they stood silently, awestruck. The 18-cylinder radial engine, 2 rows of 9 cylinders, explained the Thunderbolt's broad shape, but its real marvel lay in its craftsmanship. Every component reflected precision and quality that German factories could no longer match. The cylinders were uniform and perfectly balanced, the crankshaft a masterpiece of metallurgy. Schulz quickly began calculations in his notebook. The engine produced at least 2,000 horsepower, likely more with the integrated turbo-supercharger. By contrast, Germany's BMW 801 radial engine in the FW-190 produced about 1,700 horsepower, pushing German engineering to its limits. The Americans were mass-producing engines with 20–30% more power and doing so effortlessly. What he found next was even more alarming. Searching for evidence of resource shortages or simplified wartime construction, Schulz found none. The engine used high-grade aluminum alloys, precision bearings, and first-rate components, no signs of cut corners or inferior materials. "Herr Oberleutnant, look at this," one of his mechanics said, pointing at the cylinders. "Each cylinder can be removed individually. If one's damaged, it can be replaced without taking apart the whole engine." Schulz nodded. It was a stroke of brilliance. Repairs would be faster, downtime shorter, and operational readiness higher. German engines required full disassembly for similar maintenance, but the feature that truly unsettled him was the turbo-supercharger system. Reports had described it, but seeing it firsthand was another matter. A complex web of ducting ran from the engine through the fuselage to a turbine in the rear, channeling exhaust gases to spin a compressor at over 20,000 RPM, forcing pressurized air back into the engine. The design demanded ducting capable of withstanding extreme heat, a feat of engineering beyond what most German factories could sustain. The turbine needed to spin at extreme speeds that would destroy substandard bearings, and every part of the system required precise calibration to prevent engine failure. German engineers had experimented with turbo-superchargers, but they had never successfully put one into service. The technical barriers were too great, materials too scarce, machining too delicate, and manufacturing too complex. Yet here it was, not in an experimental prototype, but in a mass-produced American fighter, one of hundreds rolling off assembly lines. Schultz ran the calculations and realized that with this turbo-supercharger, the P-47's engine could maintain full power at altitudes where German aircraft struggled for oxygen. Above 25,000 feet, the FW-190 and BF-109 lost considerable performance as their mechanical superchargers faltered in thin air, while the P-47 remained powerful and dominant, the undisputed master of high-altitude combat. "Can we replicate this system?" his assistant asked. "Herr Oberleutnant," Schultz replied, shaking his head, "not with our current capabilities. It demands precision machining, high-grade steel, and thousands of hours of skilled labor. We're already barely managing to produce basic aircraft. Adding this complexity..." He paused. "It's beyond our reach." The realization was crushing. The Americans hadn't just built a superior fighter, they had built one that embodied an industrial capacity Germany could not rival. Moving on to the airframe, Schultz found the same unsettling truth. The P-47 had suffered severe battle damage, cannon strikes through the fuselage, machine gun hits across the wings, yet it had still returned home and landed safely. Examination showed multiple 20mm impacts that would have obliterated a German plane. The Thunderbolt's thick aluminum skin, strong internal framing, and redundant control systems gave it incredible resilience. Reports from Luftwaffe units told the same story. Pilots pouring cannon fire into P-47s only to watch them keep flying. Built like a tank, the Thunderbolt sacrificed agility for durability. Its cockpit was encased in armor plates and thick bulletproof glass, while the massive R-2800 radial engine acted as a protective barrier. Unlike the liquid-cooled inline engines of the BF-109 and FW-190, it could lose cylinders and still run. Schultz reviewed documentation showing P-47s returning with destroyed cylinders, punctured fuel tanks, and shredded control surfaces, damage that would have doomed any German fighter. One engineer remarked, "It's over-engineered. They've traded weight for durability." Schultz nodded. "Yes, but they can afford it. Their engines are powerful enough to carry that weight. Ours aren't. We're forced to save every kilogram because we lack the power to overcome it." It was a fundamental difference in philosophy. German aircraft pushed the limits of performance, while American planes embraced reliability and strength. And, brutally, the American way was proving superior. Next, Schultz studied the P-47's armament, 8 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, 4 per wing. His heart sank as he did the math, 400 rounds per gun, totaling 3,200 rounds. With a combined rate of fire exceeding 100 rounds per second, a 1-second burst unleashed a storm of metal. 2 seconds meant 200 rounds tearing through the air. By comparison, German fighters typically carried fewer guns and far less ammunition. A BF-109 might have just 60 cannon rounds and 500 for its machine guns. P-47 pilots could fire repeatedly across multiple engagements before reloading. The 50 caliber rounds themselves were heavy, high-velocity slugs capable of ripping through armor and airframes. Schultz finally understood reports describing P-47 attacks as a wall of lead. With 8 guns converging at a single point, any aircraft caught in that cone of fire would be obliterated. A Thunderbolt didn't need precision, just proximity. His recommendation was simple: avoid head-on engagements. The chance of surviving return fire was negligible. As he completed his report, Schultz recognized a deeper pattern. Every part of the P-47 reflected an immense industrial system behind it: precision machined engines, advanced metallurgy, aluminum in abundance, and a vast ammunition industry to feed its guns. Each of those elements alone would have overwhelmed Germany's wartime production capacity. The P-47 combined all of these innovations into a single aircraft, and it was being mass-produced at an astonishing rate. Schultz requested detailed production figures from intelligence sources, and what he discovered left him shaken. Republic Aviation was manufacturing P-47s on a scale that defied belief. By the end of 1943, they were building more than 500 each month, with plans to reach 600, 700, and even 800 monthly by 1944. In contrast, German factories struggled to assemble 300 to 400 single-engine fighters across all models, their output continually hampered by Allied bombing raids. The numbers became even more staggering when Schultz examined engine production. The R-2800 Double Wasp powering the P-47 also drove several other American aircraft. During the war, over 125,000 of these 2,000 horsepower engines would be produced. For comparison, Germany's total aircraft engine output across the entire conflict amounted to roughly 250,000 units, most far less powerful. America was producing more of one advanced engine model than Germany was building engines of every kind combined. Staring at the figures, Schultz rechecked his calculations, convinced he had made an error. The results remained the same. U.S. aircraft production for 1943 alone was projected to surpass 85,000 units, while Germany's would total around 25,000, a ratio of more than 3 to 1. Worse still, American aircraft were larger and more complex. A single B-17 bomber demanded more aluminum and labor hours than 3 Bf-109 fighters, and yet the Americans were building thousands of them. The material imbalance was catastrophic. While fighting a global war, supplying the Soviets with aircraft and tanks, and supporting Britain, the United States still outproduced Germany in every category. Schultz knew his forthcoming report to Berlin would be dangerous. It detailed the P-47's technical superiority and acknowledged Germany's inability to match such industrial might. His summary read, "The P-47 Thunderbolt represents an industrial and technological capability beyond Germany's present reach. Its mass deployment demonstrates that American production capacity far exceeds all prior intelligence estimates. Recommendation: avoid prolonged high-altitude engagements with P-47s. Strategic conclusion: continued attrition against a numerically and technically superior opponent will lead to unsustainable losses." In essence, he had written, "We cannot win if we continue this way." His commanding officer reviewed the report with a somber look. "You know this won't be well received in Berlin," he warned. "They don't want to hear that American aircraft are superior." "Should I alter the findings?" Schultz asked quietly. The officer shook his head. "No, it's accurate. But be ready. Truth isn't welcomed these days." The report was sent up the chain, and Schultz never received an official reply. Through informal channels, he learned it had been dismissed as defeatist. One staff officer reportedly sneered, "This engineer has been corrupted by enemy propaganda. The P-47 is crude, American junk compared to our designs." Schultz wasn't surprised. He had seen this before. Any intelligence that contradicted Nazi ideology was rejected outright. Yet for him, the experience was transformative. The P-47 revealed not only the enemy's technological edge, but the true nature of the war itself. In the months that followed, his grim predictions materialized. P-47s appeared over Europe in ever greater numbers, German fighter losses mounted, and veteran pilots were killed faster than they could be replaced. The Luftwaffe gradually adopted his recommendations, hit-and-run tactics, avoiding high altitudes, but by then the outcome was sealed. American air superiority, built on industrial strength, was complete. As Schultz examined other captured U.S. aircraft, C-47 transports, P-51 Mustangs, and others, he saw the same pattern repeated: exceptional materials, advanced systems, and mass production at a scale Germany could never equal. The C-47 alone numbered over 10,000, while Germany's transport fleet barely reached a few hundred outdated models. The P-51, with its American-built Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, combined the P-47's range with even greater performance. Every aircraft reinforced the same conclusion: Germany was fighting and losing an industrial war. The evidence had always been there, but ideology blinded the leadership. Schultz, a man of numbers and physics, could see what others refused to admit. The war was already decided by mathematics and machinery. Germany was being buried beneath a tide of American steel. After the war, when production records were released, Schultz's wartime estimates proved conservative. He had actually underestimated U.S. capacity. Between 1940 and 1945, America produced more than 300,000 aircraft, compared to roughly 94,000 built by Germany. The United States alone turned out over 15,600 P-47 Thunderbolts, more than the total combined output of BF-109s and FW-190s. The R-2800 engine that had so impressed Schultz in 1943, over 125,000 were manufactured, not only by Pratt & Whitney but also by Ford, Chevrolet, and other car makers repurposed for war production. This level of industrial mobilization was unprecedented in human history. Automobile factories were retooled to produce aircraft engines. Shipyards that once built freighters turned out aircraft carriers. And assembly lines that had made consumer goods now forged the weapons of global warfare. Yet this was not merely a triumph of numbers. The quality remained exceptional. Even late in the war, American aircraft showed no signs of declining standards, no crude shortcuts or compromises driven by material shortages. German fighters, meanwhile, increasingly bore the scars of desperation: inferior alloys, simplified construction, and sloppy workmanship as experienced laborers were drafted and replaced by forced workers. Schultz survived the war and was later questioned by Allied technical officers who were fascinated by his 1943 report on the P-47. "Did you truly conclude from a single aircraft that Germany would lose the war?" one officer asked. Schultz paused before replying, "I concluded that Germany could not win an industrial war against America. The P-47 was proof of a production system we could never match. Every component, every system, demanded resources and capabilities beyond our reach." "But you were only one engineer," the officer pressed. "Surely others saw it too." Schultz nodded. "Many did. But in the Third Reich, telling the truth was dangerous. Better to stay silent than be branded a defeatist." The American officer told him they had found his report in captured German files, stamped, filed. No action required. Schultz laughed bitterly. "I'm not surprised. The Nazi leadership didn't want intelligence. They wanted confirmation of their beliefs. When reality contradicted ideology, ideology prevailed." The story of Werner Schultz and the captured P-47 was a snapshot of Germany's wider collapse. A trained engineer analyzed enemy technology, correctly identified an insurmountable industrial disadvantage, and was ignored. His experience mirrored that of others. Admiral Canaris, who warned of American industrial power; Albert Speer, who knew Germany could not outproduce the Allies; Adolf Galland, who recognized the P-47's tactical edge, and Sepp Dietrich, who foresaw the Ardennes offensive failing for lack of fuel. Competent men saw the truth, but in a regime where ideology outweighed evidence, truth was irrelevant. The Nazi state was built on the illusion that German willpower could outmatch material reality, that determination could defeat mathematics. They were wrong, and men like Schultz knew it from the moment they studied the facts. But knowing and acting were not the same. Schultz's report should have served as a wake-up call, a chance to reassess Germany's entire war strategy. Instead, it was buried in bureaucracy and forgotten. The P-47 went on to become one of the most produced fighters of the war. Over 15,600 were built. They destroyed thousands of Luftwaffe aircraft, paved the way for the Allied invasion of Europe, and secured the air superiority that sealed Germany's fate. All of it began with one engineer examining a single captured fighter and realizing that his nation had already lost. Not a battle of pilots or tactics, but a war of factories, fuel, and raw materials. America possessed all of them in overwhelming abundance. Germany had none.